Okay, in this next section, we're going to go over the creation of our leg rigs. And before we do that, I want to go over setting limits for our joints. And really, we're just going to be doing that in the arms. It's going to be our shoulder and our elbow. Everything else is going to be controlled by either control handles or IK systems. So really we're just going to set limits in these two joints. You can go in and set limits for everything else if you really wanted to, but a lot of that we're just going to be locking with custom attributes, stuff like that. So we're not going to worry about it too much. Setting limits is pretty easy. You just select the joint that you want to set your limits for, go to your attribute editor, and go to the limit information. And like I said earlier, Maya really only calculates the rotation of your joints for animation. It really doesn't look at translational data. You can set translate limits for things, but really I would only set like translate limits for like sliding things where you want to limit the slide from left to right or up and down, so on and so forth. But for your joints, you're really only going to be setting your rotation limits. So with that being said, we determine which rotation we want to set, and it looks like it's going to be the Z axis that we want to set. And then we determine where we want to set the limit at. So for the shoulder here, really you can only go about a 90 degree from the clavicle joint. So your arm's going straight up, otherwise your head starts getting in the way. You can go a little bit further over, but it looks like I'm gonna go 111. Oops, 111, and I'm gonna set that as my limit, so I won't be able to go beyond 111. So we go back to our attribute editor and set this to the max. Since it's a positive number, we're going to throw that over to the maximum limit for rotation in Z. And if we look, I can't rotate any further than 111. And I'm going to do the same thing for my negatives, or my minimum rotation, and I'm imagining that it's the full arm, so enough room for the arm over here. And you can easily go back and change this limit information later on, once you've bound your skeleton or your character to your skeleton, and determine that maybe his arm is now penetrating into his body and you want to change its limit. You can do that later on easily enough by just changing these values here. So I set my minimum limit for my rotation for my shoulder, and I'm going to go back and zero that out. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. The beauty of this is I can copy this data straight over, and feasibly it should be the same thing. So if I select my Z axis, I can't rotate any further in those two channels. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing to the elbow. And here we're rotating in Y. Yes, we are going to be rotating in Y. So my arm for my character is pretty, it's kind of got this angle, so I want to straighten it out. And then I always do a little bit of a hyperextension to it, so that you can give your animator a little bit of hyperextension to make poses more dramatic, things like that. So I'm going to zero all my rotations out, and I want to rotate in just Y Here we go. And set that to my positive amount here. So I'm just going to go with whole number and send that over with this button right here to my max and check my max and lock it. Then I'm going to go to my negative amount, which is going to be negative 130 it looks like, and send that over and lock it. So now we have limits for our elbow. So I'm going to do the same over to my other elbow, and then I'm going to pause the video and set those limits, and then we'll start working on the legs. Okay, so next what we do is we go to our IK handle tool, which is right here in your shelf if you're set to the animation tab, or you can go up to skeleton, IK handle tool, and we're going to check our option box and bring up the tool settings for the IK handle tool. If you have any questions as to what anything is in your tool, you can go to the tool help in the tool settings, and you can look up my help documents, and they'll tell you what each one of these attributes are. We're going to make sure that these guys are set to single chain, which for the leg we will change that to a RP solver or a rotate plane solver later, but for right now I want to set it to single chain so that I can show you how to change that later down the road if you happen to make a mistake. Instead of having to delete the IK and redo it, it just makes it a lot easier to know how to fix a problem when it arises. So everything else is set to the default, and we can close out our tool settings, and then we're going to start at the hip, and we're going to skip the knee and go straight down to the ankle, and that will create an IK handle for our leg. Okay, so then we want to name our IK handle following our naming convention. I'm going to skip that for right now, and I will do it once I have all my IKs into my legs. So we're going to go back to our IK tool, or IK handle tool. We're going to select our ankle, and then we're going to go down to the ball of our foot, and that's going to create another single chain IK. We're going to invoke that tool again, pressing G as in God, and go from the ball of the foot to the toe. Okay, and you can replay the video and go through that again for the other side if you want. I'm going to pause the video, rename my IK handles respectively, IK toe, IK ball, and IK ankle, and I'm going to do the same to the other side so that both sides are even. So you can pause the video and redo those yourself as well. Okay, next we're going to create a reverse foot control or inverse foot control. It's the two different names for the same thing. Basically what it's going to do is going to create functionality in our foot that simulates the bending of a foot when you walk. So you bend at the toe, you plant your toes first, then the ball, then the heel of your foot down. It'll also give us other controls which you will see later. To do that, I'm going to go to my side view, and I want to make sure that my grid is on so that I can snap points to the grid, and then I will also be snapping points to my joints as well. So in that regard, what I want to do is remember that my heel ends at this point right here. Easy enough to remember. And one thing that is different from my character opposed to your character is my character is actually up a little bit higher than the ground plane. The reason being is my character is actually standing on a platform, and it really won't matter in the end because we will have a global manipulator, a global control that will allow us to move our character wherever we want to. So we just want to make sure that the floor is set to a single line. So here it's 3 units up, 3 Maya units up from the 0 in Y. Okay, so for this we want to invoke our joint tool, but we want to go to the joint settings, the tool settings. And we want to orient the joint to world. We want to make sure that this is checked on. Reason being is if we start placing our joints in here, which I am going to turn my polygons off so that I can snap directly onto my joint. And I'm going to snap, I'm going to create a joint out here, hold down V, and middle click and drag, and it'll snap it to that joint. Then I want to hold down X and snap it to this point on the grid. Next, I want to go out here, anywhere, it doesn't matter, because we're going to let go, hold down V, middle click and drag and snap it to the toe. Then what we're going to do is click out here, let go, hold down V, middle click and drag and snap it to the ball of the foot. Again, out here, let go, hold down V, middle click and drag and snap it to the ankle. There we go. That is going to create our inverse or reverse foot chain. So then we can select the first joint and rename our joints respectively. So left underscore, I call it reverse foot. It's also referred to as inverse foot, so you can go REV for reverse or INV for inverse. It's up to you, your naming convention. Just make sure that it's consistent all the way around. And I'm going to rename my joints. So this is going to be the root joint, heel joint, toe joint, ball joint, and then ankle. So I'll let you rename those, and I'm going to pause the video for that. Okay, so I came in here and I created my joints, renamed them all, and I also color coded them to match my left hand side colors. And then the one thing that I do want to do is change the radius of my joints because they're a little hard to see. So what I want to do is change this one to, say, maybe a little smaller than that, maybe 0.75. Change the next one to 0.5. Actually, I'm going to change that to 0.75 as well. Go to my next joint, 0.75. Then the next joint, 0.75. And my last joint I'm going to leave at 0.25. Reason being is now that these joints are stacked on top of each other, they're actually easier to select. So I know that my middle joint is my actual skeleton, the big joint is the root for my reverse foot, and the small joint is the ankle of my reverse foot. So they're easier, they're a lot easier to come in here and just select the ones that I want to select, and I don't have to fight for it. A little bit easier to see. So I'm going to go ahead and take my entire reverse foot, go up to skeleton and mirror joints with the settings that we had before, so our names are all set to right without us having to redo all that, and then I'm going to come in here and change the colors to green. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is set up our reverse foot to start controlling our skeleton, because as of right now our reverse foot doesn't really do a whole lot. It just sort of does its own thing. So what we want to do is select our ankle IK, and then we want to shift select our inverse or reverse ankle joint. And then we want to hit P as in parent. Then we want to go to our ball, select our ball IK, select our inverse joint, our inverse ball joint, and hit P. Our toe IK, toe reverse joint, and hit P. And then now if we were to select our inverse foot, it actually controls the skeleton. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the same to the other side, and then we'll create a control curve that represents our foot so that the animator can just look at a control curve. The reason why we use curves opposed to geometry objects is that curves do not render in the final output. And so the animator can keep them on screen and they don't have to worry about them rendering. Whereas a geometry representation or a geometry object will actually render, and you'll have to go through extra steps to make sure that it's not renderable, things like that. So it's just easier to use curve. So I'm going to pause the video and set up my right hand side, and we will go through after that. I'll start the video back up and go through and create a control curve. Okay, so now what I want to do is actually turn off my joints. So you can do that by going to your show menu in your viewport and go down to joints. And then I also want to turn off my IK handles, which is right below joints. And that's going to turn my entire skeleton invisible. Then I want to bring my geometry online so I can actually select it. And I'm going to actually create a control curve based off of my foot. There are many tools out there to give you curves that represent feet, things like that. There's a website called Rigging 101 that has a really nice script for curves, for different control curves, and I highly recommend you downloading that. I will be using it later in future videos, so you don't have to worry too much about it. I will show you how to load that script, but it will be your responsibility to go to Rigging 101 and actually download it. It's just www.rigging101.com, and you can find the script there. It's pretty easy to find. So I'm just going through and selecting the top edges of my toes, and I'm holding down shift and double clicking the edge to select the edge loop, and I'm just going to go through here and go all the way around. You only have to do this for one side of the foot, so don't worry too much about the extra work. It shouldn't slow you down too much. Okay, and that goes around to there. I'm going to hold down control and actually get rid of all of these edges at the bottom. I'm not going to need those, and I want to stop my line right here because these two are actually going to connect together. Okay, so now that we have our edges going all the way around representing our foot, we want to go to modify, convert polygon edges to curve, and that will give us a curve. So if we turn off our geometry for our character mesh, we have a curve representing a foot. So now what you can do is center your pivot, and you can, I have a shelf button up here in my animation tab that I created, but you can get to that by going to modify, center pivot, and then I want to scale in Y, and I just do these in little tiny bursts, little tiny strokes until, go to my side view, until it's completely flat, and that flattens out your curve. Then you can go to either bring your drop down menu down to surfaces, or for this, so I can stay in my animation menu set, I just like using the hotbox. So I'm going to select my curve, use the hotbox, go to my surface menu set, go to edit curves, and open and close curves. And that'll close the curve off for you. Okay, so now you have a representation of a foot. So bring back my character mesh, you'll see that it's a little hard to select, so what I'm going to do is scale it up a little bit so it's easier for the animator. Go into my side view and hold down X and snap it to the baseline where the base of the bottom of my rig is going to be. Okay, so now that we have our foot control curve, I want to name it, and I'm going to duplicate it over to the other side so that we have both curves before I freeze the transformations and all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and name this left foot control, actually underscore control, so that way I know what it is, where it is, and all that. Then I want to go into my front view. I'm going to hold down D to get to my pivot, hold down X, and snap it over to the center line. Then what I'm going to do is hit Control D to duplicate it, go over to my scale in X and put a negative in front of that number, and that will scale it over in the exact same place. So with that, I want to change this to the right foot control, and then you want to freeze your transformations. I have a shelf button here for it, but you can easily go to modify, freeze transformations, or you can go to, in your channel box, you can go to edit, or I'm sorry, channels, freeze, and then all, and that will freeze all of them. What that does is it sets all of your translation information to 0, sets all your rotation information to 0, your scales to 1, and all of that. So that way these values are set to 0, and this is the default pose of our, or the default position of our control curves. Later down the road, when we start parenting these control curves and setting them up to interact with our skeleton, this information will not be translated into the children of this control. If that doesn't make sense, when you parent a object, it will inherit the translation data from the parent. So if there was information over here, it would inherit that and it would add it to the information, or the translation information of the joint, and we don't want that. That creates what's called double transformations, and it is not a good thing. Not your friend when it comes to rigging. So next, I want to bring back my joints and my IK handles, and I'm going to turn off my character mesh. I'm not going to need it for a while. Okay, then I want to center my pivot to the ankle here. So we're going to hold down D as in dog, hold down V as in Victor, and snap our pivot to our ankle. I'm going to do the same to my right side, and then I'm going to color code these guys so that they're easy to see which side's left, which side's right. So object display, drawing overrides, enable overrides, and I want to set this to a fairly saturated purple. I always set my controls to a very saturated version of that color, and I want to set this to a saturated green. why it went to red, I don't know. Green. There we go. Okay. So that's that, and that is that. Next, we're gonna parent our control curve to our inverse foot, and we do that by selecting with a constraint. With a parent constraint. And so we will select the child first. It's the reverse order of a normal parent relationship. So we select the parent first, then the child. Or the parent first, then the child, which is our inverse foot or reverse foot root. We go up to constrain and parent. And I'm going to go to option box and make sure that my settings are reset. I'm going to hit apply and close. And what that does is it parents the foot rig to our control. So I'm going to do the same to the other side. And I'm going to pause the video and then do the same to the other side. Next, I want to add custom attributes to my control curve. Right now, we don't have anything to control the foot roll or anything like that. So we can do that. I'm going to delete my history real quick on these guys. We can do that by going to Edit, Add Attribute in our channel box, and it'll bring up this pop-up window here. Then we want to name our attributes. We go heel rot for rotation in X. We're going to set it to a float, which is a number that has a decimal value to it. So 1.2, 1.5, 5, 6, 9, so on and so forth. And we're going to leave the min-max information at just empty for right now. We're going to add it. Then we're going to go in and create the heel rot Y. Add that. Heel rot Z or Z. Add that. And then we're going to add the ball rot, ball rotation. Then we want to add our toe rot in X. Add that. Toe rot in Y. And toe rot in Z. Okay, now we can close our add attribute menu, and I'm going to pause the video and do the same for my other right foot control. Okay, now that we have custom attributes assigned to our control, we're not going to need a lot of our attributes here, so we're going to clean up some of these attributes so that the animator doesn't have to look at them. So what I'm going to do is in my channel box, select the attributes that I want to get rid of, which are going to be the scale, X, Y, and Z, and my visibility. I'm going to right click and go down to lock and hide selected. And I'm going to do the same to my right, lock and hide selected. Okay, now what we need to do is connect these attributes up to our rig so that they actually do something, because right now they're actually not assigned to anything. And we do that by a couple different ways. You can either go up to Window here in the menu, go down to General Editors and go to Connection Editor, or you can select a channel, go to Edit, and then go down to Connection Editor. Okay, we have our foot control selected, and we want to load it to the left. Then we want to select our inverse or reverse foot heel joint and load that to the right. Then in our left hand side for our control, we want to select our heel rot X. Then in the right side, we want to go down and find rotate and open that up and select rotate X. We can do the same for Y and the same for Z. Then what we want to do is select our ball and set up our ball rotation. So we want to select our inverse ball joint and load that to the right. Select our ball rotation, open up our rotate in our right hand side, and set that to X. We're going to do the same to the toe, load that to the right, select our toe rotation, open up our rotation for our right hand side, and set X, do the same to Y, and the same to Z. Now we can close that, and if we select our control, we can test out our attributes. We have our rotation, Y, Z, ball, toe, Y, and Z. Okay, one issue I'm having is in the local rotational axes. My heel rot X is not behaving the way I want it to. It's not rotating in X. And that may be actually adjusting. Yeah, see, the Z should be X. So to change that, we're going to select our root for our reverse foot control, our reverse foot skeleton. Right click in open space out here and go down to select hierarchy. Then we want to set our turn on our local rotational axes. I have a shelf button, but you can go to display, animation, or I'm sorry, transform display, and then local rotational axes, and that will turn them on. Then we want to select our heel. We want to go into component mode by hitting F8, or you can also select this button up here, and you want to hit the question mark. And if you have any questions what the question mark does, you can right click on it and you have local rotational axes, image plane. We don't have any image planes or any multi-mesh components, so we can just select all of them. And what that's going to allow us to do is select our rotational axes. So we can go to rotate, select Y, figure out why it's not letting me rotate in Y. Might be a issue, yes. There we go. It was an issue with my rotate mode. So I want to rotate the X 90 degrees. And a quick trick for that is you can go to discrete rotate and then set this to 90 degrees. There you go. Now we know it's an exact 90 degrees. So now if we go out of component mode by hitting F8, if we try our reverse, our heel rot, we get the right movements that we want in Y and in Z. Okay, I'm going to pause the video and redo those steps on my right side, and then we'll finish up setting up our controls on the left here. Okay, now we want to limit our controls so that they don't accidentally go beyond what we want it to do and create unrealistic deformations like breaking the ankle like that. To do that, we select a channel that we want to manipulate or change, go to edit in your channel box, and then edit attribute. And that's going to bring up this window right here. I do have a lot of these settings predetermined. I'm using values that I've already established, but you can easily just go in and figure out, you can select the attribute, rotate it to the setting, the value that you want, and set that as your minimum. Same thing as we did with the other limiting information. Set that to your maximum, so on and so forth. but I already have values. So for my heel rotation in X, I want to set my minimum to -45 and maximum to 0. Then I'm going to go to my heel rotation in Y, set my minimum to -90 and my maximum to 90. And same with the Z, -90, +90. My ball rotation, I am going to set the minimum to 0 but leave the maximum open. My toe rotation, I want to set the minimum to 0 and the maximum to 85. My Y rotation for my toe, -90, +90, and Z rotation is -90 and +90. Okay, I'm going to do the same to my, I'm going to pause the video and then do the same to my other side, and then we'll set up another control for our hip centering and another control for rotating in our foot and so on and so forth. Okay, so now that we have our attributes locked to the values that we want them to be at, we want to clean up some of these controls so that the animator doesn't have to see them, things like that. So what we're going to do is select our IKs and place them in the untouchables layer. And we can do that by right-clicking the layer and add selected objects to the layer. And I have my visibility off and reference turned on so they're unselectable and they disappear. So I'm going to do the same thing to my toe and my ball IKs and add them to my layer so they're a little bit cleaner. Then what I want to do is create a locator, and if you're in your animation shelf tab, the locator is right there, or you can go to create locator. It's the same thing, and I'm going to position this a little bit better here, something like that, so it's underneath my character and in between my feet. And this will be the hip center. So what we want to do is select both of our control curves, shift select our locator, and then we want to go to constraint, point constraint, option box. We want to make sure that our settings are set to are reset, set to the default, and then we want to apply, and we can close. What that's going to do is when we move one foot, the hip center stays centered between the 2 feet. So now we can select our root or our hip joint, shift select our hip center, and hit P as in parent. So now when we move a foot, our hips stay centered between the 2 feet. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I did go in and color my locator, and you can do that easily enough by going to your attributes, drawing overrides, enable overrides, color, and set it. Again, all my controls are set to the very saturated version of that color, so since this is in the center, it's a saturated red. Later down the road, we will be making the locator invisible because we will not need to see it, but while we are still rigging, we're still going to be using this locator, so we're leaving it visible for right now. So the next thing you want to do is create a display layer for each of your controls. So we're going to go back here, select our control, and then hit the very right button over here, which is add object to layer, to a new layer. We're going to name that layer left controls, and I'm going to give it the saturated purple color. Left controls is invalid. Oops, my apologies. Left underscore controls. There we go. Maya doesn't like spaces. I'm going to do the same thing to my right hand side and call it right underscore controls and give this the saturated green color. There you go. So the next thing we want to do is give our feet a little bit more realistic controls when they rotate. Right now when they rotate, the knee sort of bends, but the hips don't bend with the knee as they do with us humans. So that is achieved easily enough by selecting both of your control curves, and you can do that by just drawing a box around them or shift selecting them. And then you want to shift select your locator. You want to go up to constraint and create an orient constraint, but we're going to use the option box. Then in our settings, we want to reset our settings. We want to uncheck the constraint axis from all and only select the Y axis. Then we can hit apply and close. And what that's going to do is when we rotate a foot, our hips rotate with it. Okay. Okay. Now that is all we're going to do for the legs. We have all of our foot controls and everything else. So the next video we're going to set up our spine controls, and I will actually be going over 2 different versions of the spine controls.